Hey everybody, this is a follow-up video to my STREAMIE demo that I gave yesterday. So some people were asking for me to cover a little bit more about the pipeline builder aspect of the demo. So I thought I'd give you that. Like I said, this is a very simplified impromptu thing that I built just to kind of frame people's minds around how quickly you can build stuff in a no-code environment. So pipeline builder, no-code, AIP stuff, making things like super easy, super fast. Workshop no-code right application built upon the objects that are defined in the ontology. Now, because I don't want to make you, confuse you too much with too many things, I just have all these data sets essentially funneled down through into one single object. But normally in an enterprise environment, you might have like this movie object, and you might have an interface that represents streaming services and Netflix and Hulu and Prime Video and all this. So like they have objects themselves that are defined or that implement the streaming service interface. And so they may have relationships or links established to the movie objects. So each movie, if it's available on several different platforms, would link those object relationships right together. And so for every streaming service may have several movies, and every movie may have several streaming services. And so that's the cardinality between those two objects. And maybe you can define an action in the ontology for those streaming services, such as like user authenticating against the service. So like maybe signing into your profile, stuff like that. So whenever you click on a movie and you see, oh, here's like Inception, it's available on Netflix, and I click that, maybe I can open up a pop-up that lets you start streaming, or maybe it takes you over to that streaming service. Right now, we're kind of like analyzing and searching by movies in a sort of like a read-only format, and then maybe I have here where you can like navigate over to IMDb and then read more about it. But this is just like a learning demo, so let's get into the actual lineage pieces of it. So I downloaded like what CSV or JSON data sets from the internet, and I went to the pipeline and I imported it, and then I used Pipeline Builder to sort of unify that data, consolidate it into one set that could be backing my movie object. So go into Pipeline Builder, go to Add Data, and I could browse from my computer, and I could just drag those like CSV files, for example, in here, and it's going to populate here as like raw data. So in this case, in this example, maybe I'm trying to just build a movie, strictly movies, and this data set contains movies and TV shows. So it's showing like a movie type. So like I can just go here and say like transform, and it's going to populate this, right? And I'm going to say, all right, well, filter out only types that are movies. So it's going to drop off all TV shows, and then drop off all the stuff that I don't really care about, because all I want to do here is have all the titles and whether or not they exist on Prime Video. So I create a new Boolean value and I set it to true, so that later on when I go to like outer join, which is essentially say like unify the data by title, give me all data associated with both, I'm gonna have like, all right, here's all the titles that exist on Netflix and all the titles that exist on Prime Video. And then I do another outer join to say, all right, here's a title data set that is true for all streaming services that exist for those titles, right? So this whole little section here are all streaming service title joining it together. And in fact, because some of this stuff's a bit repetitive, I'm going to be like, all right, I need to be able to maybe normalize my column names, maybe pull out only movies, you know, set a true Boolean value, that kind of stuff. I can actually hover and highlight and go to AIP here and describe the transform that I want to do. So like extract only the movie titles, right? And then I hit generate. So AIP will actually like try to figure out the type of transforms that I have to do and create them for me, and like add that to the pipeline. So it actually went ahead and did that. And so you actually like, let me see here. Look at the transform. Okay, filtered. Yeah. So it basically pulled out all the titles for me like I told it to do. See? Now I'm just going to remove those because I don't really want them. I already have my stuff. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's essentially all the streaming services. I unified it, join it, outer join. So now I just have titles and whether or not they exist on those streaming services, because that's really what I care about. I'm actually going to use IMDb as my like metadata source, of information pertaining to those titles. But as you can see here, my titles don't have a release year at the end of them, where IMDb seems to have that because maybe there's titles that share the same name, And in fact, this is the kind of strategy where it's like if you're trying to store data, you should have a primary key, usually a unique identifier. Maybe if your key is the title, but movies could have the same title, your primary key should be unique. And so you might take maybe like the title and create a secondary column and say like take the title and marry it with like the year it was released and define that as like your unique key. And that's how you should probably do these things. In this case, like when I'm trying to perform a join between several different data sets, I want to join them together and say, give me all titles where they're all, where they exist on both sets by title. I need to make sure that the type and the format or how you represent a title is the same so that you actually yield the correct results, right? And if I did this before, I basically get nothing because the titles over here are not represented over here, even though they're referring to the same movie. And in like Rotten Tomato, where they have like, all right, what date was the movie released to theaters? What date was the movie released to streaming? In some cases, it went to theaters first, then to streaming. In some cases, it went straight to streaming. So I actually don't care about the day it came out. I just really care about the year it was released, similar to how it was like represented in the IMDb stance. So like you might go in here and you do a transform, and then maybe you like, all right, you drop off the, maybe like you only care about the year. You, if it's empty, make it null, and then in the event that like you assign the release date to theaters as your release year value and it's still null, then maybe you just take the release date from streaming. So that might have been really confusing here. Actually, like let me show you here. Uh, yeah, so release date originally 2 dates. If you have the date to theaters and you only care about the year, set that as your release year. If it's still null, meaning you don't have a release date to theaters, set it to the streaming value, right? So then you, at the end of the day, you have a release year defined by when it came out in theaters or when it came out in streaming, either or. Also, box office values, right? Box office is represented as 234.2 thousand USD, right? So you as you know how to read this, but it's really a string of characters. This is just text. But if I want to actually like in STREAMIE be able to like give you a range of box office, give me movies that made between this money and this money, right? This value is like a numeric calculation. Give me money that produced more than $100 million. It's gonna, the only way for you to do that is to like use like greater than comparisons, range values, etc. But if it's a string, it could actually only like say, oh, give me strings that equal this string. Give me strings that contain this string. Give me strings that don't have this, string of characters or something like that. So you need to actually use the pipeline to transform the data from being like, in this case, a string to like the actual number. So as you'll actually come in here, I'll show you. I take, let's see, is this it? Box office string, yeah. You'll see I actually I take the suffix from the string and I determine the multiplier from that. And then I take the numbers in the string and convert that into some numeric representation, which is like a double, and multiply it against the multiplier to actually get the net yield. Like, what does that string truly represent in a number? And so I convert that here, and so that whenever I actually have my data set in the end, I have this like double numeric representation of the box office performance, so I can query against it. So the whole point of really all of this is figuring out and playing with the fact that this data is coming from different sources. Maybe they have different standards for representing the same stuff. Like this, here's IMDb, has an IMDb ID. And I noticed that the posters that are associated with, that came with this data set, have a file name that is defined by like the IMDb ID in the name of the file. So when you convert that media set to this like media set reference for you to use in the application here, so like it like extrapolates that out, gives you the path to the file, as well as like the reference to use in code and stuff. I need to be able to like fetch the name of the file to determine the ID so that I can join it with the actual like metadata ID by that ID that I pulled out of the file name. So now like although the posters were stored separately as like poster or media cover files, it really is associated with the IMDb, and I'm able to join the two to like represent, okay, these are IMDb movies with the metadata and reference to the cover image together. And then that way I can like, all right, take the streaming data, take the Rotten Tomato data, join that in, take the IMDb data and join that in, and now we have like one movie list with all of it together and represented in the value types that we want. Another one is like we set all of our streaming services Boolean to true, but we never set to false if it was null. So here we say like in the end, if my true or false for those streaming services is equal to null, then just like make the value false. So then I actually have a true or false like actual Boolean representation and not like null values. It's just little things like that that you can do to bring the data down into one place and then kind of surface that up to the application. So hopefully that helps shed a little insight into the actual pipeline building process.